Donald Trump has just crossed a line no American president has ever approached. Not during war, not amid crisis, never before. He openly called for Canada to be expelled from NATO while simultaneously disrespecting their fallen soldiers. 457 Canadian troops lost their lives fighting alongside U.S. forces in Afghanistan, and Trump dismissed their sacrifice as meaningless. This isn't a slip of the tongue. This is a deliberate attack on the transatlantic alliance that has protected the West for 75 years. From a legal standpoint, what's happening is the systematic erosion of U.S. credibility on the international stage, and it's unfolding live. Let me break down exactly what occurred, because the headlines don't capture the legal and institutional disaster taking shape. On February 10, 2026, President Trump issued a public statement, not a classified memo, not a diplomatic cable, a public declaration demanding NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte begin procedures to expel Canada from the alliance. His reasoning: Canada's defense spending hovers around 1.4% of GDP, below the 2% target NATO members agreed to achieve. Here's the key point they're not telling you. There's no mechanism in the North Atlantic Treaty to force a member out. Zero. Article 13 allows members to withdraw voluntarily with 1 year's notice, but a forced expulsion would require unanimous approval from all 32 member states to amend the treaty itself, a process never successfully completed in NATO's history. Trump is demanding an outcome that international law makes impossible. But let's step back. Why Canada? Why now? Canada has been a founding NATO member since 1949. Their forces fought in Korea, deployed to the Balkans, and served 13 years in Afghanistan, the longest deployment in Canadian history. 457 killed, over 2,000 wounded. They invoked Article 5 after 9/11, the only time NATO's collective defense clause has ever been triggered. They answered the call, they fought, they died. Here's the kicker. Canada announced in 2024 a detailed defense modernization plan, aiming to hit 2% of GDP in defense spending by 2032. They're on schedule, expanding procurement and Arctic defense capabilities that directly bolster American security. So this isn't really about spending. It's about something else entirely. Pay close attention. Within hours of calling for Canada's expulsion, Trump posted on Truth Social that Canadian casualties in Afghanistan were a bad investment, claiming their soldiers died for nothing because we lost anyway. Think about that. The President of the United States told grieving families and an allied nation that their loved ones' deaths were meaningless. Canada's Prime Minister responded with a rare formal rebuke. The Defense Minister called it an insult to the fallen and an attack on the core principles of NATO. Now, here's where it gets constitutionally and legally alarming. From a prosecutor's perspective, Trump's actions violate multiple federal statutes and constitutional principles. And here's exactly how. First, the Logan Act, 18 U.S. Code 953, bars unauthorized citizens from negotiating with foreign governments to influence their conduct. Trump is president, so you might think he's authorized, but the Constitution grants the treaty-making power to the president only with the Senate's advice and consent. The North Atlantic Treaty was ratified by the Senate in 1949. Trump cannot unilaterally alter or withdraw from NATO without congressional approval. Precedent from Goldwater v. Carter points to this, though the Supreme Court left it unresolved. Trump is trying to force a treaty change, expelling a member without any legislative authorization. That isn't constitutional governance, that's autocracy. Second, and this is what should keep everyone awake at night, Trump is actively undermining the treaty alliance that forms the foundation of U.S. national security. Article 66 of the Constitution designates treaties as the supreme law of the land. By demanding Canada's removal, he is instructing NATO officials, and by extension, U.S. diplomats, to breach obligations the U.S. is legally bound to uphold. This could constitute a violation of his oath of office, which requires him to faithfully execute the office of president and preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Systematically dismantling treaty alliances is the opposite of preservation. But there's a strategic question. Why pick this fight now? Why Canada? Evidence suggests this follows a familiar pattern. Trump has spent years questioning NATO's relevance, documented repeatedly. During his first term, he reportedly told advisors he wanted to withdraw entirely, confirmed by former National Security Advisor John Bolton in sworn testimony. In 2018, Trump allegedly told EU leaders NATO was as bad as NAFTA, conflating trade deals with defense obligations. Here's the prosecutorial insight. The timing is not random. 3 weeks ago, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for senior Russian military officials for war crimes in Ukraine. Canada promptly committed to enforce these warrants on Canadian soil. The U.S. has not. Trump has stayed conspicuously silent on enforcing accountability for Russian aggression. Connect the dots. Trump attacks the NATO ally actively pursuing justice for Russia. He cites defense spending, a metric affecting nearly every NATO member, but singles out Canada, not Germany, not Spain, not Italy. From a legal perspective, this looks like retaliation. There's precedent for interpreting Trump's behavior this way. During the first impeachment inquiry, we witnessed real-time witness tampering. Trump's tweets attacking Maria Ivanovich while she testified before Congress. That was obstruction. That was intimidation. The pattern is clear. Trump weaponizes public statements to punish those who defy him. Now consider the comments on Canadian war dead. This is where legal exposure intensifies. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Article 88 prohibits commissioned officers from speaking contemptuously about the president or other officials. Trump is commander-in-chief. Legal scholars are debating whether dishonoring Allied soldiers killed alongside U.S. troops constitutes conduct unbecoming the office, potentially impeachable. American soldiers served alongside those 457 Canadians. They shared bases, missions, and trauma. Some Americans were saved by Canadian forces. Some Canadians died protecting American positions. When Trump says their deaths were meaningless, he insults both Canadian and American families. That isn't political speech. It corrodes military morale, allied cohesion, and the trust that enables joint operations. Consider the democratic and legal consequences. The fallout extends beyond a single inflammatory statement. First, institutional collapse. NATO has survived the Cold War, the Balkans, 9/11, Afghanistan, Russian aggression in Georgia and Ukraine. Never has it faced a threat from an American president trying to dismantle it internally. If Trump fractures NATO, even partially, he achieves what decades of Russian strategy could not, without congressional approval, judicial oversight, or constitutional checks. We are witnessing unilateral executive action in foreign policy at levels that would alarm the founders. Second, precedent. If a president can expel a treaty ally over personal grievance, what's next? South Korea, Japan, Australia? The slippery slope isn't hypothetical, it's happening. Third, legal exposure. This matters post-presidency. If Trump's actions harm U.S. national security, demanding Canada's expulsion could trigger federal statutes. 18 U.S.C. Codebook 2381 defines treason as aiding enemies. I'm not claiming treason, which requires war. But undermining alliances to benefit adversaries invites serious legal scrutiny. For future commanders-in-chief, the evidence is stark. Public statements, harm to alliances, reactions from adversaries. Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has praised Trump's comments as realistic and refreshing. When Moscow applauds, you have a problem. Here's what worries me most. Having spent decades inside the DOJ, I've seen that holding powerful figures accountable in real time has become nearly impossible. Impeachment failed twice. The 25th Amendment requires cabinet cooperation, and Trump has installed loyalists in every key position. Federal courts move slowly. By the time cases reach final judgment, the damage is done. What remains? Public pressure, congressional oversight, and the knowledge that eventually accountability comes. History is patient. Here's the bottom line. What Trump did, demanding Canada's expulsion and dishonoring war dead, is not a one-off. It's a stress test. He is probing how much destruction he can inflict before anyone intervenes. So far, no one has. The Senate hasn't censured him. The House hasn't acted. Allied nations issue statements and wait. Democracies fail not with coups but through gradual erosion of norms, treaties, alliances, and trust. From a prosecutor's view, this is a criminal enterprise operating openly, with traditional checks, indictments, trials, blocked by the office he holds. But there is hope. The law endures. The record is permanent. Ultimately, Americans will decide if they live under the rule of law or the whims of a single individual. Stay informed. Pay attention. The only way to endure this is for enough people to grasp what's at stake. Accountability and truth will prevail.